On this episode, I interviewed Andy Tran. Andy Tran has been helping investors for many, many years. He's a designer that works on drawings and permits and things like that for your suite additions. If you're looking to do a duplex conversion, triplex, fourplex, or even if you are looking to add a garden suite or a laneway house at your property. So we talked a lot about that process and how investors have recently been using these new rule changes to add density to their properties and some of the benefits involved with doing that. So if you guys are interested in that sort of thing, I think you're going to love the content here. Make sure to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening on, and make sure to share this with somebody that you know that might benefit from the information as well. We want to get the word out there. We want more people to start investing and to learn about the strategies. And then finally, you can connect with me on Instagram, WellOffX. Feel free to send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. So there you go. Enjoy the episode. Here with Andy Tran. I think this is the second time you're on the show. Thank you for coming by. We had some technical issues, but hopefully it turns out pretty good with these mics. Why don't you just start off by telling me what you've been up to lately? What are things looking like in your life?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks a lot, George. Thanks for having me. So I think the last time we did this probably a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot has changed since then, of course, we all know. And, we're still pretty busy with our additional suite projects. A lot of changes in the past couple of years with policy, with the market. And I think that the sentiment is that, we're going to see a lot more densification. A lot of the stuff that we do, we call it the max suite strategy. So taking your existing single family home, the standard has always been the basement suite, but now we can do 3-unit, 4-unit conversions. We can do the garden suites.
Mm-hmm.
And in Toronto, you can do what we call the 4+1 special. So the main house can be 4 units, and then we do a garden suite in the back. So definitely a lot of different options for additional housing units, right? Because when the government says that, they need to have, 3.5 million new homes in the next 10 years, it's not just traditional, condos or single family homes. These units are an important part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, the people that are going to be doing these are homeowners and small investors and developers that are going to be doing this. So that's pretty much what we've been up to since the last time I was on your podcast.
Yeah. Well, for anyone listening who isn't too familiar with you, I know you've probably covered this 1,000 times, but how did you get to this position where you're actually doing drawings and representing clients? Like where did that all start?
Yeah, sure. So my background is in architecture. I went to school for architectural science and worked in that field for a little bit. And then I actually went away from that. I got into the home inspection industry. And then at the same time, I was an investor myself. And I just saw that this seemed like the direction that things were headed, where housing was going to get more expensive. There's going to be more people. We need to be more creative with our housing strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did it on my own property back in 2010. I converted that to a duplex. And at the same time, I was teaching at Carson Dunlop. I was training home inspectors. So that, along with my investments, everything kind of aligned to say that, hey, this can be a real consulting business. And with my background in architectural design, that's kind of when I put everything together. And really, it's almost been 10 years right now. And the rest has been history in terms of, the projects that we've been involved with, right? So that's kind of really, really short nutshell.
Yeah. Perfect.
As to how I got to where we are right now.
Is it a worthwhile business to get into? Like, if anyone's listening and they're thinking they want to kind of have the same sort of business, does it make sense, do you find, or is it kind of tough to make it work because there's maybe a lot of competition or the margins are really thin, or I don't know?
So the short answer is yes, absolutely. I think that there's a ton of opportunities in this business, even though I'm telling people to do this and it's more competition for me. I don't mind it. I can't even make a dent in this industry because the demand is so huge and it's growing. And as a matter of fact, I want more people to do what I'm doing because then it becomes more of a standardized concept and standardized strategy where people recognize it. There's more acceptance by the cities. There's more acceptance by residents that this is really the way to go for more housing going forward. And I think that it is a great business. I think that if you are into design, if you have an architectural design background, that's great. But if you don't, you can build a team, you can hire the right people. But it's definitely something that is growing. And you asked about kind of the margins of the business. There's different ways to do it, right? You can be very lean and you can have a home office and do something like this by yourself. And that's what I did for many years. Or you can have an office and hire people. It really just depends, just like any other business, right? But I would say that the margins are good because there isn't a lot of capital investments to get started, right? You have a vehicle, you have home office, really, computer.
Yeah, just basic stuff.
Yeah, basic stuff that anybody can get started if that's what they want to do.
Cool. Let's talk about ADUs. So additional dwelling units.
Yes.
That's kind of the hot topic now because municipalities and the province is more open to that and they want more housing. You said you've worked on like over 24 of them in the last couple of years between conversions and like everything that you have going on. Can we talk a little bit about the costs? Because I've had other like contractors on the show before, and they would say like it could be anywhere from 150 to 250, 300, whatever. But I've heard of other people telling me it could go up to like 500,000. So let's talk a little bit about the cost and what could drive that cost up for anyone who's looking to have an ADU on their property.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And those numbers that you just threw out there, that was sort of the range of some of my client projects. Anywhere between let's say 150,000 for a simple garage conversion versus even 500,000 for a 3-bedroom 1,300 square foot laneway home in downtown Toronto, right? So that could be the range, and really it's going to depend on what needs to be done. Like I mentioned, if it's a garage conversion where you already have the existing foundation and you have the structure there, you obviously need to finish it. You need to get an engineer to sign off on it. You need to connect the services and utilities. Probably the minimum is going to be 100 and 150, right? Just like very similar to doing, let's say, a basement suite. But if you're then building a new structure, you're building the foundation and you're doing all of that, that's definitely going to be north of 200 for even a very simple unit. And then depends on how fancy you want to get. It could go, 3, 4. And like I mentioned, there's an example where somebody did spend $500,000. But, this is in a prime location and it's a rather large unit. So it's very hard to say what the cost would be because it depends on the size and depends on the finishes and depends on, how far back it is in that particular lot. You have to get additional services to it. That's another big factor as well, right?
Can we break down the cost? So let's say, just to keep things really simple, you have a $200,000 project. How does that money get allocated? Like what goes towards the drawings and permits versus the construction versus servicing the lot, like all that? How would you break it down?
Sure. I mean, I can probably give you a little bit of a percentage, but I just don't have the numbers off the top of my head that I can tell you. I mean, like
just a ballpark.
The ratios would be very similar to kind of building a home, right? You're going to allocate a certain percentage to the foundation, the framing. What I will say is that you should probably expect that there's going to be a certain amount of soft costs, right? So getting a survey, getting permits, engineer fees, consulting fees. There may be a small development charge from the city, right? So that's probably going to be around 10% or 15% of the total cost. And then the hard cost, I would factor that in. That would be considered sort of the labor and materials to build it, right? And there's going to be some miscellaneous costs like equipment rentals and things like that. That's probably 85 to 90%. But in terms of the breakdown of actual the system itself, I have a couple of very good videos. If you want to link to that, I think that's going to be more beneficial for the audience rather than me trying to actually break down all of those things. I just don't have it off the top of my head.
Just maybe one last question on the servicing. How expensive is it to service a lot? Like let's say you've got a detached home and you want to build an ADU in the backyard. You've got to extend water lines, potentially gas, plumbing, like all this stuff. Do you have sort of a ballpark figure of what it might cost to do that?
Yeah. So I can probably give a ballpark figure, but again, it's going to depend on the existing system on the main house and then also how far back it is, right? So, depending on whether you're converting to 2 units, 3 units, 4 units, you might have to upgrade the service line. You might have to upgrade the electrical service. So maybe, let's say if it's 100 amps, which is common for many homes, then you'll probably have to upgrade to at least 200 amp service, or in some cases even 400 amp service, right? And you have to connect drains and and service drains and water lines and possibly natural gas as well. So I actually have another video for that actually break down some of those costs. But you're probably looking at again, depending on what's required, it's probably going to be 25 to 50,000.
Sure. I had a situation where this was a couple of years ago. I was doing a single family home to a fourplex conversion, and we had 100 amp service, so we had to upgrade because we were eliminating gas. But the transformer had to be upgraded on the street because it was older. So I think we had to pay for that too as part of the process. Like we had to pay 20,000 something, whatever, to upgrade the transformer, which is used by the whole street, but it falls back on us, right? Have you ever come across a situation like that?
Yeah, we have. So I actually came across that myself, and I already had 200 amps going to the main house, which in many cases that would be sufficient. And they said that if you want to put in this garden suite ADU, and you want to have 100 amp service to it, you would need to upgrade to 400 amps. And in that situation, it was underground service. It was a lateral rather than overhead. And they said that those big green boxes in front of the houses, we had to upgrade that transformer.
Oh yeah.
And that would be like 5 houses down from our house. So we rip up the street. And, I just thought like the neighbors would just hate me. They already don't like me because I'm doing all this construction, and they would really. So I decided to go against not upgrade that. And we actually just worked it out so that the 200 amps would be sufficient for 3 units. And we changed some of the appliances, the gas appliances, kind of made that work out. But I've had clients have to do that, is to kind of upgrade the transformer. Not to 400 amps though. They had to upgrade it in an old neighborhood to 200 amps.
Right.
Yeah, but you're right. They had to spend the money because the utility said, hey, you know what? You're the one that wants to upgrade this. Nobody else cares about it, so that's why you should pay for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, I don't know if you're even familiar, but I just have the question here about grants, rebates, incentives. Is there anything you're familiar with that you can take advantage of as a homeowner if you are adding an ADU or additional suites inside your home?
Yeah, there's a lot of grants that are available right now. Traditionally, we had these regional grants, like if you're, let's say, the region of Halton or region of Simcoe or Niagara, they would have these grants, but they would be very restrictive in terms of how, if let's say you were an investor and you wanted to build these units for tenants, it would be restrictive in terms of the income for the tenant and then what you can rent it for. And I had a lot of clients that didn't necessarily want to take advantage of those grants because who knows how inflation is going to go, and they didn't want to be restricted over that many number of years. But there are other grants now that are available at the municipal level through the Housing Accelerator Fund. That's federally funded. So as an example, the city of St. Catharines, where I know you've done some things there, we've done some projects there. They do have a $40,000 grant for internal ADUs, like basement apartments.
Okay.
And then $80,000 for detached.
Oh, interesting.
And so what I would recommend, that's just an example. What I would recommend is for people to find out from their particular municipality, like whether it's, Toronto or Kitchener or Hamilton or St. Catharines, find out what they have available for that municipality, because the allocation of the funds for that Housing Accelerator Fund that's federal, it goes to different things. Some of it is a straight up grant. Some of it will be, let's say, a reimbursement for your permit fees, things like that. So it's going to be specific to each city and town.
Sure. That's still good to know, like that 80,000 rebate. If you have, let's say you're converting a garage, I don't know if that would qualify, but let's say it costs 150 to 200, that's a big chunk of your budget.
100%. You're getting back. Yeah. I mean, whatever it is, like $80,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
So if you're going to build it anyways, then definitely take advantage of those. And those aren't going to be around, those aren't going to be around forever, right? They're going to be, once they get utilized, they're going to stop issuing them.
Have you ever had any clients take advantage of those grants?
We've had some of those smaller ones, like permit fee rebates, like $2,000, that kind of stuff. We've had clients take advantage of that. But that example I gave you, the 80,000, that's relatively new. I think it's only been around a couple months. So
okay,
I've been talking about it, but I don't know if anyone has actually taken advantage of it yet.
Okay, great. Rent control. When it comes to these ADUs, because they're new structures, I'm assuming their rent control doesn't apply to them. My understanding is that under the current provincial laws, because it's a new construction where it hasn't been occupied
after 2018. Of course, if you're going to build it now, then yes, it
Mhm.
would be exempt from rent control. Is my understanding.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
huge advantage as well.
yeah, and that's what we advocate for people building these, and so it's less of an issue because we all know what a challenge right now it is with the Ontario
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
Landlord and Tenant Board, right?
and this might be more of a question for a paralegal, but I'll ask you anyway, in case you've come across it. But if you do convert a single family to a duplex,
Mm-hmm.
do you know if those units are still under rent control, or from my understanding, I think like let's say you do a basement unit, the main floor would be rent controlled because that was an existing one, but the basement would not be.
I believe you're exactly right.
Yeah,
So it's because the basement was never occupied as its own residential unit. Now
yeah.
that it's actually built as a legal unit, it's a separate one.
Hmm.
And yeah, to my understanding, that is also not under rent control, whereas the main unit would be.
Right. Okay. Um, Housing shortage. I want to talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, maybe not your specialty here, but
Yeah.
what do you know about moving forward? Like, I know there's been talks that they're going to cut back on immigration and that sort of thing. How do you think that's going to impact people wanting to build additional units? And do you think there's still going to be a high demand for these laneway suites or garden suites or whatever moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I can give my kind of anecdotal take on it.
Yep.
I'm not a housing economist. I don't really dive deep into the data, but I do look at some of the data, and of course, we all know that the target right now is to reduce the number of the number of new immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of that is a reduction in a lot of the temporary residents and things like international students. But there's still going to be a decent number of new permanent residents and citizens, and I think those are the demographic that are going to be seeking long-term housing, like single-family homes, right? So um, we all know, and yourself and myself included, how challenging it's been to get lending in the past couple of years because of the interest rate environment. And being a small developer myself and having people in that industry, knowing people in that industry, a lot of them told me that the projects have been paused, and there's been a real lack of construction in the last couple of years. And but we also know that right now there's a little bit of inventory because of the rate environment. So in a couple of years, that's probably going to get absorbed. And in my opinion, I think that single family homes will be in continued great demand because of the demographic of people that are in search of that, and also because of the ability for single family homes to be forcibly improved
Mm-hmm.
or uh, redeveloped into multiple units. Like you don't have that option with a condo unit in the sky, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're basically at the whim of whatever the market does with condos. Where it's with single family homes, you do have the ability to have that as a product for somebody who just wants to have a single family home and they have the means to access it. But if somebody needs to turn that into multiple units, or if it's a really old property and they want to tear that down and turn it into a small apartment,
Mm-hmm.
there's that option as well. So I just see that the housing landscape in the future will be that a lot of the new supply is going to come from uh, new new construction or redeveloped construction from single family homes, which are going to be in demand. A lot of the new single family home construction is happening in places where the big developers have already they already have the ownership of that land, and also cities recognize that that's kind of the suburban sprawl method that's been happening for the past 50 or 60 years. That's
Mm-hmm.
unsustainable. There's definitely going to be a lot of infill.
Sure. Yeah, and it makes sense. Like the old strategy of infill doesn't seem to work as well now, where you would build, just one detached home or something. I think now it makes more sense financially from just a little bit of that I've seen to add as many units as possible within the allowed space, right, within the existing space. Because I think you can sell those units if you are looking to sell as a developer for a lot more than a single family home. The rent's going to be a lot higher. It's easier for people who are living in one unit renting out the rest. So I don't know if you agree with me on that.
Yeah, 100%. So we talked about that 4+1 option in
Mm-hmm.
Toronto. So one example would be, and this is something that has been done by some designers. I haven't done this myself, but they would take a single family lot, a fairly large single family lot that has an older property on it, and tear that down and then build two additional buildings that are 4 units each, and then also build a garden suite. So you're really effectively turning one unit into 10 units. And so you see those opportunities. Now, you might think that there's going to be, if they're allowing people to do that, then every house is going to turn like that. The reality is that, it's only really going to be a small fraction of properties that go through that process for the people that are aware and know how to do it.
Yeah.
It's not something that big developers are going to go into because there's just too much overhead with big companies to kind of, get into these small sites. So it works very well for the small investor, small developer, kind of entrepreneurial homeowner. But big developers, they're going to continue with their, high-rise construction and, other types of, single-family homes, stacked townhouses, things like that. But that strategy that I'm talking about, the 4+1 and potentially severing a lot, that's going to be available for, a lot of small developers that are willing to kind of roll up their sleeve and do a little bit of work with the city and go through that construction process.
Yeah, and when it comes to some of these ADUs, like I'm sure you've seen some projects, you've gotten to completion on some of them. How has the renting them out? How's that been? Has it been like fairly straightforward, or are they just people asking too much rent for them because there's a certain cost associated with building these structures and they need to get a certain amount of rent out of it? What's been your what you've seen so far?
Yeah, I think that people recognize that these are the options going forward, right? And it's not like we don't have triplexes and fourplexes that people are renting anyways. As a matter of fact, it's happening a lot in some of these locations where there's access to community centers and schools and things like that, where they may be those tenants may not have had access to those places before. So people are starting to see that, hey, you know what, if it's nicely completed with nice finishes and a little bit of outdoor amenity space and it's walkable to a school, to a park, they do see the appeal because it's not going to be as expensive as renting out an entire house, and possibly even cheaper than renting out an actual upper unit or basement unit. Right?
Yeah.
So it's going to cost you as the developer or as the investor a little bit more to convert it from 2 units to 4 units, but it's only going to be marginally more. So you can actually pass those savings on to the tenant to say, hey, instead of living in one half of the house, you're living in 1/4. It's nicely done. It's what you need. I can charge you less money, but because you've done 4 units, you've done it at scale, you as a developer can make a profit or as an investor.
Off the top of your head, are you familiar with like some of the recent rents that people have gotten for their ADUs, like in different cities, or is that something you don't have offhand?
Yeah, I don't think I have those numbers offhand, but I was always surprised at the number, like just as overarching statements, I was just surprised at how much and how high the prices have gone for individual units, right? Like I always have advocated for people to make really nice basement suites because there's going to be a lot of middle income folks that that's really all they can afford. But they don't want to live in a slum. They don't want to live in a dark, dingy basement suite. So we would always encourage people to have nice finishes. And most of them, they'll have like stone countertops and they'll have, nicer hardware, nicer bathroom fixtures. Because, a lot of these folks that are living there, they have, regular jobs. They could be working at the hospital. They could be working in a school. And, they have a little bit of extra money, but just not enough for an entire house.
Yeah.
So if you make it really nice for them, they will pay the premium, but it's still cheaper than renting, an entire property, right?
I did the total opposite of that when I worked with you on the Welland townhomes. Because I don't know, you may not even remember, because I don't know if it was even you who drafted the drawings, but your team was like asking me to remodel the main floor because the kitchen was really big and they wanted to make the space more functional. And I was like, no, I'm not doing any of that. I want to keep everything the way it is and just do the bare minimum. And like in my situation, it worked because you're talking about a property in Welland. It was going to be 2 1-bedroom units, so most likely students that were going to be living there. So I think it worked out for me because I kept the budget really low, but I can understand how having a really nice unit in certain areas, like especially in Toronto, would make a lot of sense to make it nice to attract the best people possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And nothing is a set rule. I think it really depends on the situation, and what you've just described, it makes absolutely perfect sense, because if you're in a place where, let's say, the demographic is students and they're going to be rougher with the property, you might not necessarily want to spend. You want durable, good materials, but you may not necessarily want to spend on the higher quality. Whereas, if you had that basement unit in the annex in Toronto where it's going to be $2,500 for a one bedroom, then you would probably want to do that to attract that higher income tenant, right?
Sure.
So yeah, you have to look at it as for that particular case and see if it makes sense.
Yeah. Before we move on to the next section here, was there any final thoughts, anything people should know about, like anything you've heard about recently, any changes, anything like that?
I would say that just to reiterate the part about making sure you understand your municipality, because there's a big change in terms of zoning right now that's happening in every city. And your property can be eligible for potentially even higher than what the provincial mandate was, that Bill 23. So, you might be able to build 4 units or 5 units or do something like that. There might be free garden suite plans that the city has. So, for example, Mississauga offers free plans that you can just submit for your property and build it. And you don't even have to spend money on a designer.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, there's a lot of changes right now, but it's at a very local level. So I do encourage, you guys out there to just search for your city that you're interested in, and call the city, email the city. Usually they're pretty good.
Cool. Before we end things, you just want to tell people what services you're providing and how they can reach you.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. So you can actually just find out all our information on suiteeditions.com. You can reach out to us there if you want a consultation, if you want help with design work. If it's not something that we can assist with, we can certainly recommend other professionals that can help you. We have our YouTube channel. You can just search up Suite Editions, SUITE Editions. And we have a ton of information on there. We have free guides that people can download. And exhaust all of those free resources. And then if you need us to help you out with a design or consultation, just reach out to us and we can schedule it in.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, George.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Your support is truly appreciated. And if you can share this with a friend or family member that might benefit from the information, remember, our goal is to motivate and inspire others to take action and to build wealth and to become well off. Enjoy the rest of your day.